So there are three broad themes that I was going to ask us to touch on. One of them is to do with the qualities of the light itself. So duration, so the brightness, the colour spectrum work, what's the balance between sort of circadian, that melanopic system, and the emotional system, sort of duration over time, and it was distribution, wasn't it? We've got exposure across the day and then zoning. So let us talk now, if that's all right, about the qualities of the light. So when we say better light, what do we mean? Stuart, would you be able to just, in your view, for lighting for a residential care home, which is going to support the health in its broadest sense of the people in it, what would you say are...
I mean, I'd just default to the guidelines that we published last year, which was during the day a minimum of 250 melanopic lux, preferably higher, and as it was alluded to earlier, preferably daylight. I mean, if you look at them, even on the day to night today where it's overcast, you will have thousands of, probably 2,000 or 3,000 melanopic lux outside. So it's log units different between indoor lighting. So over 250 melanopic lux during the daytime, and preferably below 10 melanopic lux for 3 hours before, 3 hours before bedtime. And it's particularly that evening period, which is what's going to cause a delay. Okay. But the brighter light during the day will actually help with that stable entrainment as well. So, and that's what John and I spent a long time talking about that. Now, of course, those guidelines are largely based upon the laboratory data that are available, and the laboratory data that are available are predominantly on younger individuals. So there will be, there's that issue of high degree of variability between the general human population anyway, but also the fact that there may be a reduced sensitivity in an elderly population as well, not just from things like changes in lens transmission, but also just actually it seems that these pathways are less responsive with age as well. There are some good studies showing that the lens transmission doesn't explain anything. So basically you want, in terms of then the spectrum, that MP ratio, you want it close to 1 during the day, but on an evening, you do want to drop. That's where you can actually drop, you want to be dropping the intensity, but the way of actually dropping that melanopic EDI intensity, part of that is changing the colour. I mean, if you drop it from a high colour temperature, correlated colour temperature to a low correlated colour temperature, you can basically have 20 photopic lux, but with 10 melanopic lux. So you can actually have more light available for vision. And I think a really important point is what Torben pointed out earlier is it's the tolerability. It's what people, there's always a conflict between the circadian design of lighting and the visuals. There's no point us saying, well, actually what you want is complete darkness from 6 o'clock onwards, and you'll sleep really well, but you'll have no life on an evening because you'll be living in the dark.
Dinner will be a mess.
Yeah, you won't be able to see it.
The thought about daylight being innately the best is something that I have relatively second thoughts about. It being extremely difficult to control, it being extremely difficult to apply to the right places. Great parts of the season, it creates health-related effects that are really not desirable. And there's the energy aspect to it, where it's not just more that is better in our perception at least. So also when it comes to the perceived sort of experience of being inside, being in a cave, where actually the aperture is changed, is altered compared to outside. I mean, do we really want to have outside light here? And is it feasible to do it energy-wise, blah, 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 architecturally and all kinds of things. So being that, just keeping in mind that at the sun, the day where the sun is completely at the right spot with the right intensity and everything, it is fantastic to have insight, but all the other days it is a problem. And all the other days constitute enough of our lives to realize that we need to have a lighting system. We need to have artificial lighting system that will definitely do it for us. And then we should strive to bring as much outside inside as at all possible. But we are in a cave, and it's probably more philosophical, architectural approach to it. Who are we trying to fool? I mean, we are inside, and the way we perceive our surroundings and the cognitive load we have while we are inside as opposed to outside. You might have a meaning about that. It's different. So I think that the fundamental question about what is optimum lighting is very much for whom, what are we doing, what time of day, and I'm not sure that I completely agree that daylight is always the best.
I would agree in the sense that actually if you have over several thousand lux inside, it's horrible glare, and you wouldn't want to work in that environment.
So we do that in ICUs where it is a requirement to have 1,000 lux from artificial lighting, even operating theatres with 6,000 lux in, and it's all about contrast, it's all about layout, distribution, luminaire design, blah, blah, blah. It can be done, it's not economically optimum, and it has a huge amount of challenges to it.
I'd break up on your point because I said that there's a preference for daylight, but you can have a preference for daylight. The whole point, and this is where I come from, and it's that controllability. So that if you want more daylight, I can give you more daylight. If you want to reduce glare, I can reduce glare. If you want, and that the whole point is that the system that is installed, as you said, has to be flexible to do virtually most that you can. It comes down to light source as well. The difference between the melantropic and the phototropic, that's new to me today, so that's something I'm going to follow up. So the light source, the control of it, the glare, the shading, the application, the constant daylighting capabilities within a system as well. These are all things that a control system has to give. It has to give. It can't just do a little bit and say, well, we'll get away with the rest. It has to be able to do that. And then you can give people the option, and it's giving people the option and the choice, regardless of where they are. If they want to be in the dark, they can be in the dark. If they want daylight.
I think the issue can be in a retrofit situation, as you guys, as many people have. How do you those additional layers of control can be more problematic?
That's where that conversation of right at the beginning. What do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve? What is possible? That's got to be done right at the beginning, not value engineered out.
Yeah, agreed.
Watching residents in the winter months, they will move towards the brighter light in the daytime, and they will seek it out. And the clear difference between cleaner, brighter light than maybe a fluorescent one that's not. And you just watch people living with dementia, watch people's habits, and they move. At night, they will move towards the warm light, absolutely. And the impact of the bright light in the day and the warm light at night on them is profound, and we see it. Whether that's psychological, I don't know. Professor Foster says melatonin, is it important or not? One of the side effects of it makes you feel calm. And for the people that we're caring for, living with dementia, that's really, really important. And so I guess we've done it, and it's working. We don't know why, and we need to find a way to do more of it. So certainly in the winter, being able to have brighter light for longer is important, and a better type of light. And in the evenings, to have a calm, warm light has a profound impact. So we think that's really, really important.
And when you say cooler, fresher, I mean, we were looking at samples of 4,000 versus 6,500 Kelvin, and you were very clear that much cooler, sort of fresh air feeling made a big difference.
Yes, it's like sunlight coming through the crack in the door when you see the difference of that light, and that attracts somebody towards it to go to it. It's important, and of course, building design going forwards and helping people to get a light diet in the day for other reasons, I'm sure is really healthy. There's far more we can do and raise awareness, and that's part of what your job is, to raise everyone's awareness, isn't it?
I think the design of the building just basically achieves everything that we wanted it to. That the access is there, doors are locked, as Ed was saying before, in most care homes doors are locked, they're not at one side. The whole design faces in so that wherever anybody goes. But if you sit at Woodside and when you guys come next week, you'll see it. You'll see that residents just come out of their doors. They go for a walk around the plaza. They go for a walk around the walkways.
Upstairs.
The walkways upstairs. You just see people going for a stroll. They can't get out. They can't get lost. They don't need accompanying everywhere because people do balance their own risk. And this is, some people with quite an advanced dementia.
You've also got your cycleways, which I think are absolutely
Yeah.
extraordinarily wonderful.
But if we just focus again on the light quality, if you think about retrofit in a building, you've got that issue of you haven't, and many of your buildings, you don't have the luxury of that.
No,
So
and obviously the difference is that in the older buildings you've got the older designs where large windows weren't kind of, that those health benefits of natural daylight weren't appreciated back in the 60s when a lot of our buildings were built. So we've got smaller windows. People weren't thinking about where does the sun come up, where does the sun go down. It was just there's building, plonk it there and cram in as many bedrooms as you can. Whereas now we've got the floor to ceiling windows and everything else that lets the natural light in. So getting the right, we have some bedrooms that are quite dark in our old buildings. So getting the retrofit and getting the right level of light, it's going to make a significant difference.
And it sounds as though this 250 melanopic lux is the thing to aim for.
Well, just generally across the piece, I think this is brand new to us. I've spoken to manufacturers in the past, and because when we first got into human-centric lighting, it was all about offices. And so when you said to them, when you say to someone, okay, so you're doing this circadian stuff, what happens at night? What happens when people go home? And the response was nothing to do with us.
I mean, that's critically important, and that's why a lot of the studies where people changed office lighting really didn't have much of an effect, because people then go home and some are in a lovely light environment that's dim, subdued, calm, and they sleep well, and others are very bright lights and
Or playing Xbox all night.
well, as we all do, stare at a screen that emits light all evening. And so actually changing the light during the day is one component of it, but if you don't take into account what's happening on an evening, it's not going to work. What we've hit in terms of the circadian photobiology field have largely thought about is light hitting the plane of the eye. So actually, it doesn't matter where you put the light in the eye, it's what the light, if it gets to your eye, is. Now, where you put things in the environment will also what light reaches your eye. How you achieve that is...
That's a creative question,
design,
isn't it?
The thing I think is missing a bit here is nocturnal lighting design. I mean, the whole rationalities of us being awake at day and with all the sort of preconceptions about how light should be there does not really apply at night. So that really complex. I mean, I think we should narrow down to residential care lighting design, because there are people awake during nighttime as opposed to most nights in the domestic setting. So there are people awake and they meet people at sleep, and they will interact with people at sleep or near sleep that we should, do as little harm to as possible. And that whole setting, at least in our sort of philosophy of designing and to that setting, is that it's very much about adaptation. So they are there for the whole night, the staff that is awake. So they have the ability to adapt to very low levels of light, to very warm levels of. So the industry has sort of made I don't know if it's all Edison's fault with the 2,700 Kelvin or whatever, but the industry has definitely followed up with having availability of products that are with that color temperature. And I think that a nocturnal lighting designer should be very open to going below that. That's not sort of, the end of the world, and we can't go beyond that. So that going sub, and I'm so happy to hear that you go to 2,300, even though it's not a one-to-one conversion into melanopic exposure.
But that's not what you want on night.
There's a guideline there.
That's simply what we don't want.
There's a guideline that, I mean, from my perspective, gathering about the bonfire at night time is not something where people stand up and say, that looks odd. I mean, and you have a color temperature there, which is odd, and you have a color rendering, which is odd from the metrics, but you have a setting which is really, really nice. So the adaptation and the whole understanding of being awake, having to be awake, adapted to meeting people that are ultimately sleeping in darkness or near darkness at least, and have the ability to see clearly, to feel safe, and to be safe at the same time. That is a design challenge. So, but it's definitely a design competence that I hope will sort of, expand.
Because you mentioned yesterday that you're finding that night staff working in those conditions, in their very warm campfire conditions, they were in a sort of relaxed alertness.
There's a huge difference between feeling relaxed awake and being awake but feeling tired. So being awake with less effort, with less consumption of energy. I mean, the white light during nighttime quite often compared to like you get a freshness or alerting effect like a cup of coffee. And I would definitely recommend people to take the coffee instead of light. But just thinking about that, you are there for 8 hours. So drinking coffee for 8 hours, I mean, happy days going home to sleep and get rested by that sleep.
So just actually also add into that something that Steve Lockley always points out, which is critically important, is exposure to light for the staff on a night. They need to actually be able to be awake and alert to do their job. But at the same time, they then have to drive home often on a morning. And you do not want someone who is tired and ready to go to sleep behind the wheel of a car. And they've shown at Harvard that vehicle accidents on medical staff are actually on night shifts are a real problem. And that's another factor of, so it's that context that light on a night actually for the staff can be a good thing if they actually need to. It's same if you're working in a factory with heavy machinery, you don't want to be thinking, I'll protect my circadian health, so I'll keep the light dim. But I might have a lapse of attention.
Could we be suggesting, because of course those staff they've done a shift, they're going to go home and they're going to go to bed, but they've got to get home.
Yeah.
Are we suggesting that in some kind of utopian future we might have a requirement from the Health and Safety Act that employers have to transport their shift workers home in order that they do not have to drive dangerously in a state of
somnolence?
Somnolence. Because at the moment, with there is this enormous problem with acknowledging the true problem of shift work, the unhealthiness of shift working. Shift working is vital.
So is there a
so we can't get rid of it,
yeah.
but we are sacrificing. I feel we're sacrificing everyone who works regularly in shift work,
and
not just in care homes.
It is a socio-economic factor as well.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I mean, on a night, you moving towards warm white light is actually probably a good idea, simply because actually it is reduced. You can still see, but it's reducing the melanoptic effect.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's what you.
But you could drive that even further. I mean, if you used to red or amber LEDs, you can get sort of an NP ratio of down below 0.2.
Well, so go all the way to 0.1 actually.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what we're using. That's what.
And so then, if you project on an evening, if you then have if you have a criteria of 10 melanoptic lux, you can have 100 photopic lux.
Exactly, and so keeping it in the 10 photopic lux region is a nice place. I mean, there's plenty of light, and there's plenty, of light to see, and the spectrum is broad enough to see a large discrepancy of colors. It's clear that in case there is a special incident where you need to see very clearly, is this blood infection, is this whatever is it, you need the full spectrum in order to do that. But the remainder of the time, 98% of the time, you don't need that. And it's just the restfulness. I mean, the detrimental effect of staying awake in bright white light, I'm not really sure that would help you in the traffic safety, but definitely it is a concern, and it is a huge increased risks of doing things bad in traffic on the way home from night shift. Whether I think it's still out there whether to see, is it better or worse depending on what light you've been in for the 8 hours. A white wash just before you go into the car is probably a good thing.
So we've removed the staff's ability to choose the light they want, because your next generation staff will be clueless of what you're trying to achieve potentially. However, we did put it in an emergency light feature, so for the 2% of the time you may need medical attention or to have brighter light, then they can put that up. We factored in a timer so that then would return it back to the bright setting for that time of day, to try and get our human behaviour out of that. We've had to, for costs, we've removed things like offices and stairwells out of that. So staff could choose to go into a brighter light area if they wish, but certainly in the living areas there's no choice. It's all automatic timing.
And are you seeing, in terms of staff alertness, so that they, in their workstations, it's at that low level in the evening as well, the low warm level?
Yes, in all the households and everywhere that it is, yes. And combining it with other technology and monitoring technology, so the staff don't have to patrol the building, so they can congregate together, and then they can be deployed where they need to go. And that, when you add that into the whole experience at night, then it's certainly helped.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? Joe, you have any thoughts to add to that?
No, just that obviously because the offices don't have the circadian lighting and because we have this other tech, the staff aren't spending all night in the lower orange light.
Right.
So it maybe doesn't have that same impact for them.
So that's a gap. Thank you.
Well, it's the same here. When we only had the Circadian light in one section, the night workers wanted to be in that section. So they really enjoy the light.
Yeah.
They really like it.
No.
We had technical problem in one section at a time, and they were very angry because they thought they had to have the Circadian light, the low light, so they were more calm. And one of my workers, she doesn't go to bed in the morning. She go home, live during the day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She goes to bed and sleep until 10 o'clock, and then she need work at 11 o'clock. So driving her home in the morning wouldn't solve the problem. So it's also how do they decide to do the 24-hour life? I have never heard anyone like her, but she does it anyway. Yeah, I wouldn't have the energy myself, but she is a lot of energy.